Hey guys, how's it going? I'm trying something new today that I'm kind of excited about, and I've been thinking about doing for quite a while, actually. In fact, when I first envisioned this channel, I thought of it initially as a conversation between me and one or more of my dungeon masters that I play with to kind of talk about, optimized characters versus unoptimized, or maybe how you would role play, how you would best role play an optimized character in a game or something like that. And it ended up not working out, but I've kind of wanted to do something with some of the people that I play with, and involve them a little bit and get their opinions and feedback and kind of have a conversation about things. And so I'm going to start a new little bit here and call it something like D&D Optimized Shorts, or if I really want to be made fun of, Sliding Into My DMs. I know, it's bad. But it will essentially be a conversation with one or more of my DMs. And I have several, because at our table, a lot of us tend to take turns. I actually have not yet, anyway, been one of them, but several of us take turns. So these conversations will be fairly short. We'll basically cover 1 to 2 topics or questions, and usually, at least in part, as a response to comments I've been getting from you guys. So it's just one more way for me to engage with you guys and maybe respond to some of the chatter that I've been hearing in the comments and in my email and things like that. That said, segue into, speaking of the comments and things, I love you guys so much, and I'm so grateful and appreciative of the enthusiasm and the responses and the support that you're all showing me, and with what I'm trying to do here. I'm also the type of guy who feels very obligated to respond to every single comment or question that people make, and I feel very guilty if I don't do so. And unfortunately, fortunately, I happen to have a really great full-time job and a very busy home life outside of work, and it's getting unmanageable. It's not like I'm going crazy. I know I'm not just blowing up. I think I'm at 1,100 or 1,200 subscribers or something like that, right? Small potatoes, I get it. But it's felt very recently, especially like I'm crossing a threshold and getting to a point where I'm having a hard time keeping up, and it's getting difficult. So in addition to that, I am getting a lot of great suggestions and feedback from a lot of you on how to improve the episodes, which I appreciate, with suggestions like including a written version of the build so that you'll have something to reference later, right? Creating timestamps for the videos and putting that in the show notes, improving the visuals for YouTube anyway. Again, we do have a podcast. Creating a character in D&D Beyond and linking that, and all these things, and they're all fantastic suggestions, and thank you, and don't stop making them. I'm stretched really thin and don't feel like I have the time to do a lot of these things that I would love to do. I hope to eventually be able to hire somebody to start helping me out with all of those kinds of things. But in the meantime, thank you in advance for your patience as I try to take this very amateurish channel and learn to crawl and then walk and then hopefully eventually run. I'm probably not going to be able to respond to every comment and question going forward, and I feel like I have to apologize for that. I probably don't need to, but regardless, I hope you guys will talk amongst yourselves and answer one another's questions and engage, in that way. And I'd love to build a community. I mean, maybe we put together a subreddit or something. I don't know. Any volunteers to create a subreddit? That would be great. I also I hope that creating these shorts that we're going to start with today will be a way to respond to at least some of the most frequently asked questions and comments that I see showing up. So hopefully it will feel like I'm still engaging with you guys and not ignoring everybody and trying to respond, even if it's not necessarily to each individual comment or question that gets thrown out there. So without any further ado, after a long preamble, as is my wont, let's slide into my DMs. I can't do that. I can't pull it off. You know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it anyway, because it's okay if you laugh at me. I'm okay if you laugh at me. Welcome to Slidin Into My DMs. We're here with Mr. Rogers, one of my favorite DMs. So thanks for being willing to guinea pig this little shorts or experiment here with me.
Sure.
I appreciate it. So, okay, 2 questions that I wanted to talk about today.
Okay.
Question number 1, on my very first video, it was my Hexblade Warlock video. One of my very first comments, and I should have written it down to quote it, but it essentially said something along the lines of, you're great, and I liked your video, just to be nice, but, like, optimizers are bad for Dungeons & Dragons, or, power gamers, min-maxers, whatever.
Sure.
People who just think about the numbers and just crunch the numbers are bad for the game, they ruin the game, they make it less fun for everybody else to play, et cetera, et cetera. And, I had a response, and some other people came in and responded as well. But, I think about it a lot. And
Sure.
so, I don't know, as a DM, what are your thoughts on that? How do you deal with a min-maxer, a power gamer, an optimizer like myself? You have
Sure.
experience
Yeah.
dealing with people like me at your table, because not everybody at our table plays that way, right?
No, definitely
Some are very less focused on optimization, almost to the point, I'm not going to name any names, where they're like intentionally, it's like, what's his name? What's the Spider-Man multiverse guy? Where somebody's like, hey, your shoe's untied, and he's like, I know, it's a choice, right? That we have, your character isn't optimized. I know, it's a choice. Yeah. And I love them. I love you guys. But it's different, right? And
For
so
sure.
it can potentially create conflict, or at least, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a rift in the D&D community between optimization and role play, and I don't think there really needs to be. There's really no need for it. I think however you can have fun playing D&D, that's what's important. So whether that's being an optimizer or being a role player, doesn't really matter. I think there's definitely some challenges as a DM when you have a min-maxer or an optimizer at your table, but they're pretty easy to overcome. So I think the first one is that you just have to balance your encounters a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have monsters that can take a beating.
Right.
Because chances are the optimized character is most likely optimized for damage, and so
Sure.
they're going to be the tank or the fighter or the barbarian or the...
Mine always tend to be.
Yeah, or some sort of great spellcaster that can do a lot of damage. But either way, it's usually for damage. So you need to have a monster that can take a hit. Then comes the hard part of what happens if you accidentally down
Right.
the min-maxer.
Because especially if you're at a table like ours, where not everybody necessarily plays that way, right?
Right.
Like, if, just hypothetically speaking, you have a fighter, barbarian, great weapon master, polearm master guy who's doing like 60 to 80 damage in a round.
Yep.
And a lot of the other characters are doing 15, 20, 25, 30.
Yeah.
If you create the encounter in such a way that, like, the monsters have, like, sort of bonus hit points or hit a little bit extra hard or whatever, and that barbarian fighter drops,
Right.
and maybe you can't get him back up, like, are you going to TPK your party?
Right. So that's when, as a DM, you can do a couple of things. You can either, the easiest thing is just kind of fudge the rules. I know that's not the popular answer, but sometimes you need to be like, oh no, he misses the level of the 12 AC. Darn it. I wonder how that happened. So sometimes there's a little bit of that. The other part of it is maybe you build kind of like minions that are attacking everybody else, and you kind of have like a bigger guy that's focused on. And if he goes down, then he's like, all right, well, I'm satisfied. I got my kill or whatever. Yeah. So kind of depends on your encounter. I think the other hard piece of it is now making sure everyone feels like they're kind of getting into the spotlight a little bit.
Yes.
Because obviously the damage dealer is going to have the spotlight during a combat.
Right.
So how do you get everybody else that kind of moment to shine at the table? And so I think a lot of that is through role play elements or through you really just need to know your players' characters and like what they're good at, and giving opportunities for a cleric to be able to do an awesome healing or do some cool trap if they're a rogue, or do something, have this awesome moment where they get funneled into a tiny little room and a wizard gets to cast fireball on them or whatever. Right. So it kind of just depends on your table.
So but just giving everybody an opportunity to kind of shine and get the spotlight, even if that doesn't necessarily mean doing boatloads of damage.
Exactly.
I think any good DM finds a way to help their players feel cool.
Right.
Regardless of sort of why, for some of us, we feel really cool just doing a ton of damage and killing stuff. Right. And for some people, that's fun too, but, maybe there's some sort of hook into their backstory, that gives them a chance. Or maybe they have some kind of niche spell or feat or class feature or something that doesn't like for example, in our first campaign that we ever played together, I was a monk.
Yep.
And our DM, who is not you,
not me,
did a great job, to his credit, I think, of giving me a lot of opportunities to use some of those niche, not necessarily combat related abilities that the monk gets, like being able to feather fall, right? And fall from a distance without taking damage, or run up vertical surfaces or across water, or all those cool things that monks get to do that don't necessarily lead to a lot of damage, but still are like, oh, I'm so glad I'm a monk, like that felt awesome, and that was way fun and memorable in the game, right?
For sure. I think just giving everybody their moment. I think that's...
So, verdict, optimizers don't necessarily ruin the game, in your opinion. I know not everybody.
And one thing, if you have kind of this division at your table where maybe you've got the optimizer and the role player and they're kind of butting heads, maybe give both of them a moment to kind of suck, so the other person can be like, ha! Let the barbarian fail a wisdom save or whatever, and let the role player get smashed by the boss. Like
let the barbarian who doubles everybody's damage thanks to the fact that they're a barbarian and they happen to have a legendary greatsword actually suck for a minute and or get possessed by that sentient greatsword and end up having to fight the rest of his party for control of his soul. It leads to great awesome moments in the game, right? Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. Okay, so the second question that I wanted to talk about is specific to a question that's come up just based on the video that I posted yesterday, my Bladesinger 2.0 rework. And it's a little complicated, and so this is kind of a rules lawyer type question. I want you to make a call on how you would rule this at your table, because several people have commented. It's a bit of a setup, so bear with me. Bear with me. I've had a lot of comments just in the last day on that Bladesinger 2.0 video where I talked about Tosh's changed how Booming Blade works.
Right.
It now requires essentially rules as written. I know Jeremy Crawford made a tweet saying he would allow it at his table, but rules as written, it requires, it doesn't work with Shadowblade, right? It requires a physical weapon that's worth at least 1 silver in order to cast Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. So you couldn't Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade with Shadowblade.
Right.
Some commenters have said, this doesn't mean that your Bladesinger can't use Shadowblade and Booming Blade, and this is why. Because at level 6, Bladesingers get extra attack. And now, after Tasha's, one of those attacks can be a cantrip. Right? And so the idea is, gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could Shadow Blade and then Booming Blade and then make an offhand attack with your weapon that you're holding in your offhand.
Sure.
And I basically said, I don't think you can do that. And I've had some commenters say, I think you can. And it would work like this.
Okay.
So you've got a Shadow Blade in your main hand. You've got a short sword in your offhand. Both light weapons, right? So you can technically do 2-weapon fighting. So on your turn, as your action, you can make an attack and cast a cantrip. You make the cantrip attack with the short sword, right? Booming Blade, short sword, Booming Blade. Then second weapon attack with the Shadow Blade. And then you get an offhand bonus action attack, 2-weapon fighting, and you can make that with your Shadow Blade. And so now you're getting 2 Shadow Blade attacks and your Booming Blade attack. Granted, the Booming Blade's coming from the short sword and not from the Shadow Blade.
Right.
I had a response to him, but I'm curious to know if I tried to pull a fast one on you and let you, tell you that my Blade Singer could do this at our table, what would you tell me?
So first, you're obviously not going to have that massive setup to pitch it to me at the table
in game.
Right. So I'd probably just make a quick ruling, and then talk about it later. But I think the intent behind the way that the rules are written is that when you're taking the attack action, you're using your main hand weapon. So I see it as you're using, whether that's your Shadow Blade or whatever. In the case of this spell, you're probably not going to be able to do that with Shadow Blade because you're doing your attack action, and the cantrip is part of your attack action. So that's the main hand attack.
So you would say you have to use the same hand to both take your weapon attack and, in the case of Booming Blade, cast a cantrip essentially. And
then your offhand is going to be your bonus action. So
so my response was essentially the same, because in the player's handbook under 2-weapon fighting it says that basically you make an attack with one hand, and then as a bonus action you can make an attack with a weapon that you're holding in the other hand.
Right.
And that other hand thing seems to be important here.
Yeah, so I think the way around it, and granted it's not going to do as much damage because you're not using Shadow Blade, but if you swapped which hand was which weapon, and your main hand weapon is just your short sword, then sure, you can get your attack, and then Booming Blade, then your bonus action is going to be the Shadow Blade. Okay. But that's just not going to do nearly as much damage as if you did it reverse.
It would depend on what level spell slot you're using for Booming Blade, right?
Sure.
And what level you were, because sorry, for Shadow Blade I meant, because Booming Blade scales with level.
Right.
Shadow Blade scales with spell slot.
Right.
So,
I guess you
guys can see me already. I'm crunching the numbers. I'm going to plot out the graph. Like if you D6 weapon attack and D6 plus Booming Blade damage, and then offhand Shadow Blade, it's all going to depend. Is that better than some other use of your concentration? Whether it's, if it's animate objects is always going to win.
Right.
But maybe at 5th level or 6th level or even 7th or 8th, it might depend on whether or not you're in dim light or darkness. Sure. What the enemy armor class is. Excuse me. Upcasted Summon Fey is probably going to beat that. I'm almost positive. Some people would probably say Haste would beat it, but then you're only just getting an extra short sword attack. I don't know. Food for thought.
Right. Yeah, I think you'll have to crunch the numbers and run
I'm gonna
run another episode.
I'm gonna have to do an addendum to my last episode. Anyway, I appreciate the ruling. And so again, of course,
right, up to your DM's discretion.
Yeah.
So
always at your table, it may vary. So that's just you sliding into my DMs. But if you're sliding into your own DMs, you might have a different experience.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, I wanted to keep these short. That was probably even longer than I anticipated. But hopefully, you guys will enjoy a little additional content and some engagement. And I appreciate, Mr. Rogers, you being here and giving us your input.
Awesome.
I hope that you'll be a regular for us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I probably need to give a turn to some of the others because we have several. But yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
See you.
Have a good one.